Hello, everyone. It's AZ, and we're back for another episode of the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. And in episode 78, I'm featuring my friend Matt Spaid. Matt is going to be talking about his challenges with PTSD, addiction, and abuse that happened in his childhood. This is a really heartfelt and gut-wrenching story, but it also is quite emotional. And so if you're not in a great headspace today, I'd maybe encourage you to listen to this episode at a different time. So there's your trigger warning. However, it is a happy ending of resilience and a successful career and a wonderful family life. And I really think you're going to enjoy the episode. Also, quick reminder, get registered for 7-Minute Science. I'm going to put the link in the show notes. This is a free webinar. It's going to be held on November 6th. 2023. It's at 6 p.m. Central, and you will get to hear from 7 of some of the top researchers in firefighter fitness, wellness, mental health, you name it. I would love to see you all there. And don't worry if you're on duty or you're not able to make it live, there will be a recording sent out afterwards. So make sure you get registered. I would love to see you all there. And now here's my interview with Matt Spaid. Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive. Hey, podcast listeners, it's AZ back for another episode of the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. And today I am here with my friend, Matt Spaid. Matt, say hello to the people.
Hey, people.
Hey, people. I like it. There was a little bit of enthusiasm, not crazy. I like it. As always, I like to give the listeners a little perspective on how I met someone, and I think I have this correct, but also I'm going to open it up to Matt to unfuck the story if necessary. So, I think we became social media friends after I appeared on the Power Athlete podcast. And Matt is a power athlete coach, listens to the podcast. So I think after the podcast, he became a follower, and then we just started chatting on Instagram. Is that accurate? Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I remember I was listening to your episode, and you were talking about strength training relating to mental health. And it was just like, I was like, finally, someone is talking about this and gets it. And yeah, and just kind of
speaking your language.
Exactly. Yeah. And just connected through social media. Yeah.
Yes. And I remember not long after that, I remember seeing like the most horrific pictures on your social media of the flooding damage at your house. Like your whole family had to move out and all of the things. Was that 2020?
No, that would have been, was that Harvey? Did I talk to you then, or was it, maybe you saw an anniversary of it? Because Harvey happened in 2017. No, you're thinking of Hurricane Laura.
Yes.
We didn't get hit by Laura, but everyone, it missed us. It hit Lake Charles, but we flooded during Hurricane Harvey, which I think was before I had talked to you.
All right. I mixed those two events up in my head. This is why we fact check. We fact check, Matthew.
Yeah.
All right. That said, we're going to talk about PTSD and some other topics. But first, I want to give the listeners a little bit of a chance to get to know you. So the first question, as always, who is Matt Spaid? The mic is yours.
I am a dedicated husband and father, also a strength coach. Like you said, I am one of the power athlete coaches. I've been in the fitness industry in some sort of way since 2012. Been in the fire service since 2013. I've been both a full-time firefighter, a volunteer, at a combination, part-time, and then now I'm currently full-time. I'm a captain at my current department here in Orange, Texas. And yeah, I do firefighting, and then I just do personal training on my garage now, not at a gym anymore. And yeah, and then I just kind of, I'm also a big mental health advocate, being a Marine veteran as well. I was fought in both Iraq and Afghanistan. So very big in the mental health space as well. Always trying to do something to better other people.
I think that's a great answer. And as a bonus, when I became social media friends with Matt, I also got to be social media friends with his wife, Lori, who is awesome. And by association, I am now friends with the Spaid children, and they are the recipients of very many stickers, magnets, and other paraphernalia. You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. The second question I want to ask you is, what sets your soul on fire?
I knew this question was coming because I've listened to your podcast, and I was like, I'm going to do something to prepare for it, and I didn't prepare for it.
Perfect.
But yeah, it makes it even better, more authentic. So what sets my soul on fire, I think I kind of said it earlier, but helping others. It's a big part of why I joined the Marine Corps. It's a huge part of why I got into the fire service. It's why I love coaching. And it's why it's just something that I enjoy doing, whether I'm helping them through fitness or helping them on some sort of a 911 call, helping them with their nutrition. I love just finding ways to help people, get through this thing called life.
I think it's pretty much the epitome of a servant heart. I truly think that you are one of the people that have that authentic servant heart. So
thank you.
There you have it. All right, last question. How are you, Matt Spaid, changing the world?
I'd like to think that I'm being a good example, and trying to raise the next generation to be good people, whether that's my kids especially. Obviously, I focus more on my own, but it's important for all kids. I train some youth athletes as well. And just by being a good example, what's that quote? I think it's by Maya Angelou, that be the change that you want to see in the world. It makes perfect sense to me. If you be the sort of person that puts up your shopping cart, that helps someone in need, and that's what's going to eventually make the world a better place.
Can we just agree that no matter what kind of a person you are a shitty person if you leave your shopping cart in the middle of the parking lot? Like, I'm not 100% convinced that how you do one thing is how you do everything, because I do believe you can be, say, a subpar firefighter, but a great pilot, right? But everyone who leaves their shopping cart in the middle of the lot is an asshole.
Yes, I agree.
Also, I shouldn't be swearing on this podcast because now Gabe and Zoe can't listen.
They've heard it before.
Oh, they've heard swear words before?
Oh, yeah. Not as much from me, but I have. No. They've definitely heard it from me. I'm not saying like, oh, yes, I'm a saint. No, both of us, but I have some Marine friends that aren't as good. Yeah, but I say that when I'm around them, the Marine in me comes out a little bit more, so to speak. So they've definitely heard it. They know what a no word is and when they cannot say them. So that's okay.
Also, do they know the appropriate context in which to use them? Because there is extra points for that.
No, not quite. I think they're still guessing. So
shoot, darn it. All right. Well, I have a feeling that a lot of today is going to be me sitting back and listening and you relating your story, but I will jump in with questions periodically. But as I already alluded to, you have an interest and a vested interest in PTSD. So can you take us back as far as you would like to and give us some perspective about your experience with PTSD?
Sure. Trying to think of really where to begin with it. Because at first I started recognizing that I had PTSD when I was out of the Marine Corps pretty early on. But to go back further, because one of the reasons I was able to recognize that I was having these problems is because before I had joined, I had gone to rehab and had gone to Alcoholics Anonymous to get help for drinking and other things. And before that, I was molested about at the age of maybe 6 or 7. And the more veterans I've talked to and the more I've read about PTSD, the more it's talked about childhood trauma, which is why I kind of wanted to go ahead and just start there. And it's something that I haven't really, it's not something that, you open up many conversations with, like, hey, when I was 6 years old, I was molested. So it's probably good for me to talk about too, and let others know that, hey, it's okay. Because every now and then I'll hear someone talking about it, and they'll feel very ashamed. And usually people will be surprised to see how many people it's happened to as well. I was 6 or 7 years old, and it was a friend of the family. And it was a teenager, though, so he was underage. And I don't really go into details of what happened or anything, but basically I was molested at a young age and about to be attacked.
Can you hear the freaking... Okay, first of all, Jeremiah, leave this in because I need the people to understand my pain. I now live under a very small airport.
Yeah.
And the traffic is incredible. I feel like I live under O'Hare. So you probably heard what Matt just heard, which was like a fighter bomber buzzing my house. Anyway, Matt, I'm so sorry. Please proceed with your story.
No, you're good. Hopefully no bombs drop or anything. But
right? Yeah. We'll have to reschedule if they drop a bomb.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Okay, go ahead.
But yeah, so it was a friend of the family, and won't go into really what happened, but it was something that obviously affected me as a child, especially when you're that young. My parents weren't too sure what to do about it, especially because it wasn't an adult. It was another child, basically, but he was a teenager. So, and eventually I just got to an age where I had to put a stop to it on my own. And this led to, as I got older, I started drinking pretty early on. I honestly, I don't remember at this point, but probably when I was like 12 or 13 was when I started trying to like sneak drinks. And, eventually that led into breaking into my parents' liquor cabinet sort of thing and drinking a bottle of whiskey. And a lot of that, especially when I got into high school, I started having insomnia problems and, started drinking even more to help me sleep. And, and obviously this led to other problems. And at the time, I thought, I was just teenager kind of things. And, and a lot of teens go through that kind of thing. But it eventually got to a point where, I wasn't just doing it for fun. I was doing it alone. It wasn't like a party kind of thing. I was doing it to change the way I felt. I didn't like the way I felt inside. And it was something that made me feel better. And then I got to a point to where I just wanted more and more. Eventually, we moved from, I was in Dallas for part of my high school life. And then we moved to Oklahoma City. And when we moved, I actually had a neighbor that he was a year older than me, that he was in recovery. And I guess he had noticed that I had, a bunch of beer cans in my room one of the times he came over, because I know I'd snuck into my parents' fridge at the time and was drinking and stuff. And he had asked me if I wanted to go with him to a meeting one time. I didn't know what he was talking about. I think I would have been 16 at the time. So I went with him to this meeting, and it was at midnight, and didn't really know what it was. And then I discovered, it was a Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And I just remember sitting there and at first thinking just like, I'm non-alcoholic, but whatever, it's good for these people and stuff. And just the more people were talking, the more I could relate to their stories. And I slowly kind of came to a realization that, you know what, like maybe I am an alcoholic. I was drinking very heavily, drinking to the point where I was blacking out, and drinking to the point where I was throwing up. And I honestly didn't like it at that time too. So it didn't take much for me to decide I wanted to make a change. But it was hard. Would I would be sober for about a month, and then I'd relapse. Be sober for a month, relapse, and it was just kind of this endless cycle sort of thing. Getting another flyby, but
they missed me with the bomb last time, so they're coming back.
Yeah. Got to do a battle damage assessment.
Yes.
But yeah. So where was I? The planes keep throwing me.
You were at the meeting and you realized.
Okay, yeah, and I would go for a while. I'd do pretty well. Relapse, I'd really try to work the steps in AA and get a sponsor. Try doing all the right things. I started going to counseling. There was like this kind of outpatient youth group that I would go to that was really helpful. But I couldn't stay on track. I would always stay sober for about a month or two, and then I'd relapse. So, and I remember one of the last times that I did, being in the bathroom, being able to hear my mom crying, because it was like our bathroom was on one side and the wall was their bedroom. And being able to hear her crying and just saying how worried she was that I was going to die. And because I was drinking a lot then, and it was just definitely a turning point, and that was when we made the decision to go to rehab. So I went to an inpatient rehab. It was supposed to be 3 months. I ended up staying there for 4, and that was when I really came back a different person. I dove into recovery. I really learned the book. They call it like the big book in Alcoholics Anonymous. And just did everything I could to get better because I really wanted to understand sobriety and recovery. And I just knew I was a better person when I was clean and sober. I wasn't who I wanted to be or anything like that. So I did really well with it. I was sober for about 2 years, and then I joined the Marine Corps. And probably guess what happened.
You and I have talked about this before.
Yeah. Now in the Marine Corps, and obviously, Marines are kind of known for their drinking. And that was when I started drinking again. And, it's hard now. Now I look back on it, and, there's definitely times where I drank in excess, but I think that, in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about there are some that are able to turn their drinking around and drink like a gentleman, and our hats are off to them. And I was able to eventually become that person. I definitely had some moments in the Marines that were not like that. Definitely wasn't drinking like a gentleman, but I was also in the Marines, and I was young and about to go to war twice. So kind of part of the culture, I guess you'd say. So I guess to go into more of like the PTSD side of things now, I had my drinking, and I learned recovery. I knew it was good, and I could still take a lot of good things from Alcoholics Anonymous and other parts of recovery. I still have that as a big part in my life. I think a lot of people get really angry at it, or they don't necessarily understand it. A lot of people picture alcoholics to be like the person in the gutter in the street or something. And I think a lot of people would be really surprised to see the mix of people in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. There's all kinds of different people in all kinds of different classes. And it can be really good, and it's just like anything else where there's good AA meetings and there's bad ones. So it all kind of depends on where you go, but it's definitely something that I don't shy away from. That if someone feels like they need some help, it's a good program, and it has a lot that can help people out. But anyways, to get into uh, how that got into my PTSD side of things. So I went to Iraq. I was in the infantry, was with 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines. Iraq, when I went there, the war was kind of winding down there. Really wasn't too bad of a deployment. It was more of a hearts and minds focused mission. We had like one vehicle get hit by an IED, but for the most part, we were just doing security patrols, and we're just kind of, trying to repair the relationships with the Iraqi people and do whatever we could to help them out. We still found some weapons caches and did some other stuff like that, but came back from that deployment, and I didn't really feel too different. And there wasn't anything big changes in me. Obviously, I had done a deployment, so there were some changes, but wasn't at all like Afghanistan. When I went to Afghanistan, that was a much different deployment. We were actually the start of the push in 2010 when Obama had a surge for more troops, and we were the start of the assault with that, with our Operation Cobra's Anger. And where I was at was in Nowzad, which is in Helmand province. And at the time, it was the hottest AO, or area of operations, for people that aren't military at the time. And I don't mean hot as in temperature. I mean as in contact. There was an insane amount of IEDs. It was kind of like basically coalition forces had been there since the beginning of the war, and they had their side, and there was a wadi that ran through, and the Taliban had theirs. And there was basically a string of IEDs across that wadi and throughout the village. It became a ghost town, and the Taliban they started kind of using it as almost a training grounds for new Taliban on their side to get experience with fighting coalition forces and then send them somewhere else, sort of thing. Anyway, so when I was there, we launched an offensive where we crossed that wadi, went into the city, cleared hundreds of buildings, basically kicked the Taliban out, or some of the Taliban that were there just went into hiding. And yeah, much different deployment. Lost a good friend of mine there to an IED blast when one of our snipers stepped on an IED early on in the deployment, and he was part of the quick reaction force that went out there and stepped on the secondary IED. They used to always set up two of them, to where one would kind of maim, and then they knew how we worked, so they would have another one close by in order to kill more Marines. So, and that was towards the start of our deployment. So it was a much different from Iraq. And also, I started out as a team leader, and then our squad leader became incapacitated, and I had to take over the squad early on, and basically took it over for the rest of the deployment. So, again, much different. And there were a few events from that deployment that my mind always went back to. But I know for a fact that when I came back from that deployment, and I was already married to Lori at the time. We got married young while I was in the Marines. She saw a difference in me almost immediately, and same thing with everyone else. I still remember my very first night back too. Again, going into like my drinking, I drank to the point where, again, I blacked out, which I hadn't drank anything for about 8 months. So, kind of haven't, but I blacked out and threw up all over the bed. And thankfully I didn't throw up in my sleep and die. But I remember that right off the bat, and just immediately having problems. I didn't have much. What was kind of unique to my situation was I only had about a month left when we got back from Afghanistan until I got out of the Marine Corps. There's supposed to be more time. You're supposed to have about 90 days until you get out, and they usually make you extend. But I got missed in all that paperwork basically because I was going through squad leaders course when they were getting kind of ready for the deployment, and had some guys that were actually getting out after me doing what they needed to do before the deployment. So I got missed with that. I came back from squad leaders course, and it was basically time to do our pre-deployment stuff. And then when I got back, it was basically got back from the deployment, went on post-deployment leave, came back, checked out, and was out of the Marine Corps. So I was basically in Afghanistan, and then a month later, a civilian. So very difficult transition there. I was actually denied unemployment when I first got out too. They had recommended it to us to, hey, file for unemployment while you're looking for a job. And, I very quickly ran into a lot of problems that a lot of veterans have searching for jobs. But thankfully, I found one roughnecking in the oil field, which was actually a pretty good job to transition to right off the bat for me. But there was definitely no doubt that I was dealing with PTSD then. I was starting to have recurring nightmares where I would always see this kind of shadowy figure, and I would try to move or yell, and I couldn't. And I'd be in that, I can't think of the name of it, where sleep paralysis, or I would have sleep paralysis, couldn't move. I'd wake up screaming, sometimes punching, and it was happening pretty frequently. I won't say every night, but, like every other night kind of thing, or at least 2 or 3 times a week. And at first it was just kind of shrugged it off, but it eventually got to a point where, my drinking had escalated. My nightmares were happening on a regular basis. I didn't want to be around my friends anymore. I didn't want to be in crowded areas at all. I was constantly thinking about like setting up defensive positions and where someone could ambush us from. And there were just all these warning signals going off that I honestly don't know if I would have recognized that if I hadn't gone to AA and gone to rehab when I was younger. Because I still remember one of my Marine buddies asking me when I got out if I was dealing with any PTSD. And now I realize he was probably asking because he was dealing with it himself. And I was just like, nah, man, I'm good. That was kind of the attitude. It was just like, nope, and all of us were just like, thinking like, I never went through anything that was all that bad sort of thing. It's just kind of the mindset of everyone, especially infantry. Anyways, we don't go to medical for like anything. Like if you go to medical, you're labeled a bitch. And so, which sucks now for veterans too. That's why it makes it real hard to fight the VA when like you have all these injuries and problems that they say like, well, it's not in your medical records. But yeah, so I started kind of recognizing that I was having some problems, and I told him that I thought I was good, but I definitely wasn't, and I started to just get to where I was hurting my marriage too. So we went to the VA to get help, and unfortunately all the VA was really interested in doing at the time was they told me about how I could get benefits and a different amount of money for disability stuff, and they weren't really that interested in actually helping me at the time. So this would have been 2010, 2011 ish, I guess. And so because of that, I sought out private counseling, and I actually went to the same counselor that I had gone to back when I was in high school. And she helped me work through a lot of stuff. We did that cognitive behavioral therapy, the tapping. It was kind of new at the time. And it was something that worked really well for me. I was able to go back, kind of worked where she went from, go to whatever trauma's bothering you. And I would always go back to this covert OP that we did in Afghanistan. So, which an OP is a observation post. We did this one mission where I had one team set up a vehicle checkpoint, and my team broke off and went into this area that we knew IEDs were getting set up in, and normally no one was around, but all of a sudden, IEDs were starting to pop up. So we went and we stayed there for 2 nights, I think. And I had actually been awake the whole night before, too, and doing the sergeant of the guard stuff. So I was manning the posts at night. And so I hadn't slept at all that night. And then I went out on this covert OP where once again, I didn't sleep that night. So I basically had 2 nights of 0 sleep while doing this covert OP. And while we were there was a team of maybe like 10 of us all inside this building, just staying hidden. And it was obvious all of a sudden we started getting a lot of activity, and we could tell like the Taliban were looking for us. So, and that's where I kind of always go back to. I was hidden on this parapet wall, and a guy walked up, and I mean, he was so close. I mean, I could have reached down and grabbed his head, but we all just stayed quiet like we were supposed to, and they never found us. But we were able to prevent an IED on that covert OP. But anyways, that's just for some reason in my mind when she was doing the tapping stuff, my mind would go back to that covert OP, and I think it's also because of all that sleep deprivation. That's what led to that happening to me when I got out too. But then she would just go back from there, and eventually from that covert OP and my trauma went all the way back to me being molested as a child. And so that was when that connection kind of started to make sense to me of like, this whole time, this PTSD hasn't necessarily been about this combat trauma. It's been about this trauma that happened to me as a child, and it's just now manifested into this whole other monster, and I think that's something that gets missed a lot for a lot of veterans. But anyways, where do you want me to go to from here? I feel like I've been talking for a while.
No, that's perfect. And I believe you're right, because there's some research out there on adverse childhood experiences and the percentage of military in the all volunteer, so non-drafted military, the incidence of those adverse childhood experiences is pretty high. That they're, predictive of people going into the military and public service. So I think you're absolutely right. I want to get into, I have one question that's from way back, and then I want to get into a new topic. But did your parents know the level to which you were drinking? Did they have any inkling that you were more or less an alcoholic before this friend in Oklahoma City said, "Hey, let's go to a meeting"? Like, where were your parents in terms of what they knew?
There were definitely times that they knew about it. I don't know if they realized how bad it was all the time, because there was one time I used to never, when I would break into their liquor cabinet, I would never touch like the new stuff. I didn't want to crack open a new bottle kind of thing. And then one night I did, and then I was like, whoops, oh well. And I just drank the whole thing. And it ended up being, I guess it was like some sort of like $200 bottle of something. And so that didn't just, oh, whoops, what happened to this sort of thing? And I just remember them asking me what happened to it. And I was all defensive. And I was like, you guys always think it's me. Like, it could have been my brother. And my brother was like a saint. And so they just kind of looked at me, and I was like, all right, yeah, it was me. Like, so they definitely knew that I had some moments of it. And they had caught me a few times. So I think they knew on some level, maybe not quite as severe. And I think they had that stigma too, where you think of an alcoholic, they're like, well, my son's not an alcoholic. Like, he does all this stuff, he's good in school, because I was good in school still. And, I was doing sports. But that's what people don't realize is that you don't have to like be some homeless guy rambling nonsense in the street to be an alcoholic. There are plenty of high functioning alcoholics. I think a lot of them are in the fire service and the Marine Corps, actually. So,
I think you're right. And also, before we hopped on, we were talking about parenting and how you and Lori have philosophical discussions about parenting and etc. So, as a parent, now put yourself in the shoes of now you are the parent and you are aware of this drinking. How would you handle it? Do you know?
well, that's where I think it's again. I'm kind of grateful for the problems I went through when I was younger because now I would kind of know what I went through myself, what I did to get better. Um, so it would probably start with either some sort of counseling or even going to an AA meeting with my kids if they wanted me to. There's plenty of people that just go for support, and then there's like Al-Anon too for strictly for family members. Um, yeah, I guess that's probably a good. And it's I have a lot of good advice for people with stuff like that. I don't know. I guess that's what I would do if it was one of my kids. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that sounds really logical. And then a lot of people actually don't even like to call it PTSD anymore. They want to say PTSI, post traumatic stress injury, and then post traumatic stress growth. That is really hard to say. And it really sounds to me like that is what happened with you. And can you tell me a little bit more about how you get from being that person that says, yeah, I'm good, and you know you're not good, to the person that actually reaches out their hand and says, I'm not good and I need some help?
Yeah. Well, I love those terms too. I've heard of another one that calls it just post traumatic stress. And then they differentiate the two of post traumatic stress and post traumatic stress disorder. And then I love the post traumatic growth because, yeah, I do feel like that's what I went through. Um, and when you're at your worst, that's that post traumatic stress disorder going on. And unfortunately, just like with alcoholics, what usually needs to happen for you to figure out, shit, I'm not okay, you hit a bottom. And everyone has to kind of find it on their own. You can say to someone you might know, man, this dude is severe alcoholic or this dude is severe PTSD. He needs to go get help. Like, dude, you need to go get help. They're like, no, dude, I'm fine. Like they have to unfortunately figure it out on their own. Sometimes that leads to all kinds of like drug problems or sex problems, gambling. I mean, just the list goes on. But yeah, you have to hit a bottom. And for me, for my PTSD bottom, like I got better at first when I got out of the Marine Corps, and I started going to that private counselor, and then that's when I started coaching. That was a huge part of my therapy, really, that I didn't go into much. Coaching and firefighting. Then I started firefighting. And that was when all of a sudden the stress started building up a lot more. And I believe I originally heard it from you, an analogy that you used. You may have heard it from someone else, but I think I heard it from you about the file cabinet stuff, where if you don't, you might not have a one particular incident that makes you have that, bam, I got PTSD now from this bad call or whatever. It's an accumulation of stress that builds up like files in a file cabinet. And if you don't go through them every now and then and sort them, they'll just explode everywhere. And yeah, that's what happened to me after I'd been in the fire service for about 2 years. And that's a whole other story I can go into for a bit, but that's definitely what.
Do it.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll kind of start. So I got a little bit better after I'd been out of the Marines for a while. I left roughnecking. I actually did contracting for a short time period, like as in with the Department of Defense. Because again, I was kind of searching for that camaraderie and public service kind of thing, but I didn't really find it there. And while I was waiting to deploy to Iraq, it was at a weird time period. It was when they were actually stopped giving out work visas to Iraq. So I was kept on a retainer, basically paid to wait at home to deploy. And that was when I started going to a CrossFit gym. And I eventually started using my GI Bill because I wanted to be a firefighter anyways. My plan was to do this year contract in Iraq, make a bunch of money, pay off my house, and be like set and chill as a firefighter for the rest of my life. But unfortunately, life doesn't work like that. So, they quit giving out the work visas, and I started using my GI Bill. It had been about 6 months when they finally gave me the call of like, hey, you can deploy now. And I was like, I've already like started school. I'm good. Like, I'm just going to use my GI Bill. I'll figure it out from here. I decided that was more of a single man's game anyways. I was married. We wanted to eventually have kids. At the time, we didn't have kids. So yeah, I started going to school. Eventually got on with a small fire department, but we were very busy, very short staffed. And I was coaching CrossFit on the side. And I was working admin hours. Not a lot of people realize that. So I was with a combination department as a full-time guy. And I was working Monday through Friday, 7 to 5, and coaching either before my shift, but usually after. So my days were incredibly busy. I was sometimes coaching at 5 in the morning, finishing that class, going and doing my shift from 7 to 5, then coaching an evening class and getting home at like 8 o'clock, eat dinner, go to sleep, do it again. So not 24 on, 48 off like I was doing, or what like I'm doing now, I mean. So yeah, very high stress, very busy. I was actually talking to someone just the other day about my very first cardiac arrest I ever ran was a 16-year-old girl that had hanged herself. And not long after that, I was coaching a CrossFit class. So it's like going from doing compressions on a 16-year-old to teaching someone how to squat and be all, woohoo, guys, let's have fun. I never got a good time to de-stress and decompress.
Matt, do you think that was by design? Do you think that you were making yourself that busy so that you didn't have time to think about stress and
there's definitely
death
part of that. Yeah. Part of that was definitely my personality too, because I was doing things for that department. Like I was doing things that an entire department does as one person. I was a training officer. I'd started up an academy for the volunteers. I was writing grants for stuff. I was also the apparatus, like equipment repair guy. So I was fixing pumps. I was also just a regular firefighter on top of that, doing running calls and fire prevention stuff. I was helping the fire, it was insane the amount of stuff I did over there. And just the amount of work we were doing too. Some of it was me, some of it was the administration, because he would even have us type in reports that we didn't run on, saying that the reports were just like, little work that didn't matter. And it was like, no, I didn't run this call. Like, I'm not supposed to put this report in. Like, and yeah, he didn't understand that, but that's a whole other story too. I could go on for a while about that, but I don't want to just talk bad about a department either. But I really love that department too, and love that city. And I wanted to help it grow. It needed to grow. Our call volume for our size department was insane. Very understaffed, like a lot of departments. But I was like, hey, I'm someone that, I have this second job. I have the knowledge to try to make things better. I had started a fundraiser for the department too, to help us build another station. So I was doing all these good things for the department, and I just kind of thought, all right, I can do this, very high stress, but eventually it'll all, kind of settle down. Unfortunately, like I said, I was also just running calls on top of that. And there was one more catastrophic call that I ran that I know you know about, but not everyone listening has heard, involving one of our police officers, where it was just myself and a new firefighter, and it actually came in before we were on shift, but we were both there early, where he was T-boned on the highway by a garbage truck and was pinned. And so it was just myself and another firefighter working to get him out. And it was just, I mean, like everything you could think of just bad on a wreck was basically going on. And our, what was the ambulance service there was called React. The supervisor there arrived on scene pretty much with us. We were able to get the door open, at least get the medics to start working him, stabilize him. And then it was trying to separate this car from a garbage truck that had just become one. And they had gone off the road too, so it was all muddy because it had been raining. So it was just these horrible conditions. And also in the back of my mind, I thought, the chief was coming. I thought more help was coming, because I figured he would show up at the station, hear the radio traffic, our engine is missing, none of us are there. But that didn't happen. It was just me and the other firefighter. There were some of our police on scene trying to help out as well. It took us about an hour to get him out. Thankfully, one of the wrecker drivers had worked the air brakes on the garbage truck because we couldn't separate them. But once he got the air brakes to unlock, we were able to separate them, did a dash lift, and got him out. And again, I go back to just, I was working there as a training officer too. I had never done an extrication class. I had to learn how to do it. I taught myself by watching a bunch of YouTube videos to teach our volunteers. And thank God I did that.
Holy shit.
Because
holy shit.
Yeah, we thankfully had a junkyard of cars to work on, and it was great. Because I would go out there and just have free reign. But in my academy, I was trying to get hired, so I don't know if I missed the day of extrication training or what. But because I'm assuming they probably had it, but because I had my associate's degree for it and everything. But yeah, I never had formal extrication training, but I had watched tons of, there's all kinds of good YouTube videos. There's lots of bad ones out there too, but as far as extrication training goes, I think there's a lot of good ones in the fire service for it. But yeah, so I taught a few classes on it and thankfully learned how to do a lot of this stuff. So that's how I was able to do a dash lift and get them out. And it was just a really good combined effort of everyone there. But when we loaded him up on the air flight, like, we didn't know if he was alive or dead. And I remember looking at one of the police officers I knew. I was also working, one more thing I was doing was trying to develop a rescue team with the police. So I had a real good relationship with them. And yeah, we weren't sure. And I remember locking eyes with the guy. And in my head, I thought he was mad at me. And that I hadn't gotten him out fast enough. And when I talked to him, like a few days later or something, he was like, "No, man, we were all really pleased with how hard you worked to get him out." Like, he was like, "I was just worried." But, in my head, I'm like, "Oh God, they're all pissed off at me. Like, I suck. I didn't get him out fast enough." I had all this negative self-talk going on. And, it was just a horrible day because right after we got back, get the truck back in service, running more calls, the chief had left. And so it was just me and the other firefighter still. And again, went from that shift to then coaching a CrossFit class. And that was when I wasn't able to coach. I was trying to talk and get people through stuff, but my head just wasn't there at all. And thankfully, one of my good friends was there that was also a coach. And I was like, man, and he was in the EMS world. And I was like, man, I need you to take over. Like, I got to go home. There was a bad wreck, and he had heard about it. So, but yeah, that was kind of the start of my PTSD starting to get worse again, and a lot of it was because I wasn't allowing myself to de-stress after all these shifts anyways. But then when this bad call happened, it just totally threw everything in a tailspin. And yeah, sorry, I need to get some water first.
So if I remember correctly, it wasn't long after this incident you went to residential, like inpatient
Right.
treatment.
Yeah.
Is
So
that
I'll,
right?
I'll try to get through this part fast because yeah, it's a long story, but yeah, so that
Just make sure you tell the part about the steak, okay? That's the best part.
yeah. That's a lot of people's favorite part. But anyway, so yeah, that wreck happened, and then I was kind of like at a turn where I was like, all right, something needs to be done with this department. Like, we can't just keep having this bad stuff happen. There were a lot of bad things going on that I wanted to try to fix. So myself and another firefighter made a formal complaint to the city manager, and basically in 2 days we were wrongfully terminated. He tried to force a meeting where I just told him like, hey, we'd like to reschedule. We can have attorneys present because we could see what was going on. And he threatened us, and we left. He said, if you go out that door, you're fired. And we were like, okay. So then it was a whole shitstorm of news media and stuff covering it. And they were obviously in the wrong with it too, though. And a lot of people had asked me like if he would, go back and work, and I definitely wouldn't have gone back there. But I remember leaving though, so it was a route I'd driven, a billion times, and I was driving and I was lost. Like, I couldn't figure out where I was. I tried calling my wife, tried calling my friends, and just feeling so incredibly distraught and disoriented. I didn't know what was going on with me. And this was when I had that mental break where something in me just snapped, and my PTSD took a huge turn for the worse. Yeah. And I had a lot of bad mental breakdowns. I had gone to the VA for help at one point, and that was when they first put me on some medication for like anxiety. And they actually told me when I was there that I could drink while I took it because it was real light. That seems like you probably shouldn't tell someone you can drink and take anxiety medication. But anyways, eventually I had another bad breakdown where I was waiting actually at my counselor's office, and I got an email about active shooter training, and I thought it was a message trying to say someone was going to kill my family. And I'm freaking out, calling Lori, telling her to go to the fire station, and she's like, you're crazy, I'm not going to a fire station. And I just remember yelling so loud in the street, like I felt like it was like a sonic boom that I punched a hole into like the ozone layer with my voice. And the guy came out and he was like, everything okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm waiting for my appointment, like she's late. And she came screeching in, and I went to the VA. And when I went to the VA that time, that was when they diagnosed me with being bipolar and schizophrenic, and put me on a whole bunch of other medications, like the giant, I think I've sent you the picture, the huge gallon Ziploc bag. And, I'd never been on any medication my entire life. And now I know, like, the way bipolar and schizophrenia works, you don't just all of a sudden become bipolar and schizophrenic. Like, it's something that kind of accumulates over a long period of time that you have. But by that time, it was kind of too late. I started taking the medication. I started having horrible side effects. In between all of this, though, I'm still trying to keep everything together. That was when Gabe had been born. He was very young. He was only a few months. So I had new baby, wrongfully terminated. I changed gyms too. I had a falling out with the owner at the gym I was coaching at, switched gyms. And then I got hired by another department as well, only as a driver, because they were a combination as well. And their starting position was for a driver position. So started there. But by that time, I was on these other medications that were really messing with my brain chemistry. And I still don't really know exactly what happened when I was there. I had worked only like a few shifts there. And one of the times they called me back to come in early to do some paperwork. And all of that is when things were really downhill. And I'm still not sure what was real and what was in my head. But that was when I told them, like, hey, I'm on this medication. Something's wrong with me. I need to go to the hospital, because I couldn't function. And they were kind of, I'm sure, wondering what the hell was going on with me too. So I left trying to go to the hospital, but I couldn't drive. I was just so out of it and paranoid. I thought someone was trying to run me off the road. So I pulled over, called 911. I called Veterans Crisis Line first, and they told me to call 911. And when I did that, it called the fire department that I was then working for. So they came in the ambulance and got me. And I mean, if I wasn't in better shape, I'd have probably had a heart attack because my blood pressure was like 210 over like 140 or something. And it was really bad. But when I got in the ambulance, I was able to kind of calm down, feel a little bit better. And instead of them taking me to the hospital, they called my mom. She came and got me. But then this was when, so on our drive back, her car stereo said no audio just because it wasn't connected to Bluetooth. But I was thinking that someone was sending me a message saying no audio, do not talk anymore. So that's when I stopped talking. I was only using hand and arm signals. My mom's looking at me like I'm crazy. And part of it was just me being me. Like I was really hungry and I got a can of soup, I remember, and I was just eating the soup. And she was like, "You're acting like a crazy person." And I was like, I'm hungry, like, but yeah, that was when, I stopped talking for a while. I was in the psych ward for 10 days at the VA, lost my job again this time. And I totally understand why I lost my job that time because I was crazy. That was a whole other traumatic experience in and of itself, being in the psych ward at the VA. They were literally holding me against my will because I went in voluntarily. They actually thought that when I first went in, they thought that I had possibly brought a bomb to the VA because I had my gym bag with me. And I heard I thought people were talking in. Do you know what a brevity code is?
I don't.
So in Iraq or Afghanistan, instead of saying like, "Hey, there's an IED over there," we would say, "Hey, did you hear about that avalanche in Colorado or something?" And avalanche would be a brevity code for "there's an IED over there." So I think police officers use it as well. If they see something in a car, if they say they see a gun, they don't say, "Hey, that guy's got a gun." They can say like, "Hey, did you hear about that avalanche?" So that's brevity code. So I thought in my head, I'm hearing everyone talking that they're using brevity codes. And I thought someone had said something about dropping my bag. So I dropped my bag and I'm wandering around the VA hospital. My dad eventually found me and he was like, "Matt, like the police are looking for you. They think you brought a bomb." He's freaking the hell out. And I'm not talking still either. So I definitely seem like a crazy person. But eventually they kind of checked me in. I talked to like before I went up to the psych ward, I was talking to someone, but it's crazy to me because I think it wasn't too far away from when the memorial of the Oklahoma City bombing had happened. So I think people were kind of on edge for that. And I remember the nurse checking me in, like her hand was shaking because she was so scared of me. And I just hated that feeling. Like I wasn't sure. I was like, maybe someone put a bomb in my bag, and I didn't, because I hadn't looked in there. Like it was my gym bag. I take it everywhere with me. And so I was like, "Man, I don't know what happened." I remember them asking me, "Do you want to hurt anyone?" And I'm telling them no. They're like, "Are you worried that people are going to get hurt?" And I said, "Yes." So they're just super freaked out. But obviously, I didn't have a bomb in my bag. But when I was in the psych ward, they were actually trying to have me committed. And they wouldn't let me leave. And thankfully, there were a couple of good nurses in there. There were a lot of really, really bad ones that treated me horribly, treated other veterans in there horribly. Sorry, I'm sure you can probably tell I'm kind of getting emotional about it, but I'm trying to not go into it that much. Or maybe you couldn't. Maybe I can hide it pretty well. But
I mean, let it fly because people need to hear this.
Yeah. I know there was at one point they were like jingling keys saying that I was like a dog. And there was just a lot of bad shit they did to me in there that I think I have a lot of not repressed, or I guess maybe repressed memories. And some I don't really remember. Maybe it was the medication. But, I was on the floor crying when I first got there. And I know I've said this last time I told my story, but I just wanted to hold my son so bad. And I thought my life was over. And all the staff was pretty much ignoring me, but there was another about Vietnam era veteran that came and helped me up and talked to me. And and that was a lot of what got me through the hospital itself, and just the rest of my PTSD was other veterans looking out for each other. And they wouldn't let me talk to my family. Pretty much my family would try bringing me, some clothes or some tea that I could just something to have to let them know they were thinking of me. And they would just put it in the window and wouldn't let me have it. And just kind of, I don't know, there's a lot that I could go into that I just don't necessarily want to. But the biggest issue I had was that there was a guy in there with me too. I don't remember who he was with, but he was calling his congressman because they wouldn't let me leave. I was being held against my will when I came in there on my own. And I was like, look, I need to get out of here. I don't know what y'all want from me. And, and there was another nurse, one of the good nurses had told my wife, like, you need to get him out of here as soon as you can, because I can see what they're trying to do. And they would mix up my stories because I was a driver at this new department. And I would say, well, I'm a driver. They say, well, I thought you were a firefighter. And do all these things, and or I thought you were in the Marine Corps, and just my story had a lot of stuff to it, but they would just kind of mess with me. But there were some good people in there, but obviously that was not a good experience. I got out, I had lost my job, I felt like I was at bottom once again, but thankfully that was when my family had heard of Camp Hope, based out of Houston. It was still very new at the time. It's grown into a pretty big thing now, but, and they drove me down there, and that was when we'll get to your favorite part. Even then, though, it was a confusing check-in. I don't know if I've told you this part of that story. So there was another guy checking in. His name was Matt also. So there were two Matts checking in, and I was still not talking, still wandering off doing random weird PTSD mission things. And I had disappeared, and my wife and my mom were the ones that drove me down, and they said they could hear them being like, where'd Matt go? Like, we can't find Matt. And my wife, she was immediately just like, oh no, like, Matt's wandered off somewhere. And she said, my mom was like, well, maybe it's the other Matt.
Lori's like, no,
yeah, no.
It's our Matt.
It was me. I was hiding in this back room. I was about to jump out a window. Because I thought, so the whole time in my head, I thought that I was about to be like extracted to go do some sort of a mission or something that I didn't want to do, but I was like, whatever, I guess they want me to do some sort of mission and I'll do it. But anyways, yeah, they found me just hiding in this room all in the dark and stuff. And that was when, so I thought, so, I had done that contracting job briefly. And the training with that, it's very similar to, think like Secret Service meets like police department and military stuff. I don't know how familiar you are with contracting work, but
a little bit.
So there's a lot of guys I've done it, but yeah, there were a lot of guys in my unit that went. It was with this company, Triple Canopy, and so basically in my mind, that was the other part of the PTSD stuff. Was I thought that a lot of, when I was driving, that I would think that there was like a bunch of SUVs that were following me and kind of like a patrol sort of thing, or other people watching me. Then a big part of that stuff too is that you keep your cool going on. And, so I was always kind of doing stuff. There's one time, like as the advance, you do this thing where you like put your hand up and tap the headlight to get the principal out. And, It's just, I don't know, there's these things that look normal, but in my head, it's like something else entirely is going on. And so when I got to Camp Hope, I thought that it was basically a bunch of contractors there because it's all these veterans, that are about my age. So it looks like a bunch of contractors and stuff. I was like, okay, I get it. And then that's when I was like, oh, I guess maybe I'm the principal and they're all going to drive me somewhere now. So that's when I went in the bathroom thinking that was okay. That's the safe room. And that's when I went in the bathroom and just hid in there for a while, sitting down. And eventually that was when some guy came to the door and brought me he had said they'd cooked me a steak, and that got me to come out and eat. They lured me out with the steak.
Matt, this sort of break that you experienced, was it due to the post-traumatic stress, or was it due to this cornucopia of medications that they had you on? Like, which was the bigger piece of it?
I think it was a combination of both. The medication definitely did not help, because at first I wasn't on any medication when all that stuff happened to me. So whenever I had gotten wrongfully terminated, that was like something had just switched in my brain. I was totally paranoid. I wasn't sleeping. So that was a huge part of it too, was sleep deprivation. Like I could not sleep. And then on top of all those problems, they put the medication on there that changed my brain chemistry. And if you're not bipolar or schizophrenic and you take that medication, then it'll make you bipolar and schizophrenic. So it just made
so scary.
Yeah, so it just made, and I was going to, so there's this place called a vet center, which is not affiliated with the VA, but they kind of work with them. And they were helping me out during it. And that was a guy, he had explained it to me. And that was another time where like my drinking just did not mix well with it, because he had told me, well, if you drink, it might block the medications. And so, but so I was like, do I have to drink now? Like it was like not a good combination at all. And I had actually stopped drinking before I went into Camp Hope for, I don't know, maybe like 2 weeks or something. So, but yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. It's something I think about a lot, because it's like, well, was it just my mind that led to this huge mental break, or was it the medication? And I think in my situation, it was kind of both. I think more the mind at first, and then the medication on top of it just made it way, way worse. Because I'd never been on medication my entire life. I prefer like therapeutic methods, and that's when they started giving me all these medications for everything. Like I never took, like a lot of times when I talk about it too, some people think like I maybe developed like an opioid addiction or something like that. I never took any of like the opioids or other sort of muscle relaxer pain pill stuff. It was just the psych meds. Now they had that in there. They sent me about a 3-month supply. So if I wanted to kill myself, it sure would have been easy. And that's what was blowing my mind too. And I'm like, no wonder so many of these veterans end up committing suicide. I guarantee there's a huge problem where it's by accident, because they sent me an insane amount of medication in the mail. Some of it was the same medication, but it would be in different pill form with different dosages. Yeah, so there was one time my mom was trying to handle my meds for me before I went to Camp Hope, and she had everything completely mixed up. And I was just like, Mom, no, it's like this, and it's confusing. And so it's real easy to be like, whoops, I took too many of this, or maybe I didn't take enough. And, that's where you have this huge problem. And, that's something else I try to combat, because like, I hate that. I see how that happens. And I guarantee a lot of veteran suicides aren't necessarily due to them actually being suicidal. A lot of it is just a simple mistake, and then when you get put on these medications that change your brain chemistry, you can end up being suicidal. And that's a big part of my story that I know I've talked to you a lot about, that, we haven't gotten to talk much about it, but the proactive side of things, I never got to a point where I was suicidal. And I think a lot of that had to do with my strength training. I was doing a lot of meditation already, doing all these things for my physical and mental health that made it to where when I was in crisis, it got really bad for me, but it didn't get as bad as I think it could have.
You were doing some things to fill up your bucket. Your bucket was draining out really fast, but you were doing some things to fill it up, so you were at least keeping your proverbial head above water.
Right.
Matt, I'm still back on your mom. Maybe it's not our Matt.
Yeah.
Yes, it's definitely your Matt. Yeah. So this story has I think, a really happy ending, because I see you on social media. I see you doing your strength training days with the veterans. I see you doing that stuff. And I sure as hell know that you would not be as impactful at doing that stuff if you didn't experience this for yourself. And so now I want to talk about your initiative, the PTS December, and I want you to tell the listeners about it and what you're doing, how they can get involved, and all of that stuff.
Yeah, so it's a campaign that obviously it'll start in December, hence the name, PTS December.
Hence.
And my goal with it, it's for all first responders. I figure we all work as a team. We all run 911 calls. We're there to help out other people. Let's help each other out too. So fire, police, EMS, dispatch, everybody. It's my goal for it is for it to become a proactive approach to mental health instead of reactive. Everything right now is always, they ran this bad call. Let's send the little crisis response intervention team to come talk to them. And, it's like, why are we waiting until after something happens? I get that's how, the fire service tends to work because that's how 911 works, but it's still just why, that's why we have fire prevention. Same thing with mental health. If we start doing these things, so part of PTS December is 5-5-5. You do 5 minutes of mindfulness work, 5 minutes of mobility work, and 5 minutes of walking every day for the month of December. And you can accumulate that all into like one 15-minute mindfulness walk if you want to, or even a yoga session. There's all kinds of ways you can combine it if you want to break it up, however you want to do it. But it's something to at least just 5 minutes out of the day to get you started, to build healthy habits, to where you can build some resiliency, because these calls are going to happen. There's going to be bad things that happen. Some are worse than others. You're going to have stress. I love this job. I don't want to stop doing this job. I feel like I was made to do this job. And that's why I can't stand it when there are some people that will say things like, if someone has a hard time with something, they're just not meant for this job. They don't have the right mindset or something. They're having a hard time. Like, would you say that to the Navy SEALs that, are having a hard time with PTSD? I think that they're, pretty strong and fit dudes. That they still have problems, just like I was in the Marine Corps. And that's why, I was very strong about it once I became more open about it in my department. I was pretty quiet about it. I didn't want to be known as like the PTSD guy that went crazy sort of thing. But once I started seeing other guys having problems, I was like, I need to be more open about this so that I can help other people, and to where they don't have what happened to me happen to them, or worse. So if we start to have a more proactive approach to mental health, I feel like it can make a huge difference. That is in firefighter suicide, first responder suicide, and just mental health in general. That's, again, like, a lot of people think you have to be suicidal to have PTSD or something, and that's not the case at all. You don't have to be suicidal. It's certainly a symptom. It tends to be pretty prevalent. But I think that a big reason why I never had that happen to me was, again, the proactive stuff I was doing, all the fitness stuff, the meditation. So hopefully this can start turning into a more regular thing. What if in our academies or our boot camps, we had something that talked about mental health more, because it's obviously a huge crisis. There's more veterans that have died after getting home from the war than it died in the war, due to mental health problems. And so to just deny it and just act like it's not a problem, just like in the first responder world, like, it's just ridiculous. Like, it's a serious problem, and it's something that should be talked about more openly instead of in the shadows. So hopefully with this campaign, it can kind of help start that conversation.
And I don't know if you watched it yet, but I sent you a video not too long ago about, suicide and messaging and all of that stuff. And one of the things that they're finding is very impactful with the messaging is that concept of hope. Like, there is hope. And especially this campaign, it's super simple. It's 555, but it's getting people moving and providing them with resources. The other thing that I'd like to say is that, so this year's NSCA Professional Strength and Conditioning Coach of the Year was Megan Young. And Megan, have you met her in person, Matt?
I don't think so.
You would remember, because Megan introduces herself this way. First of all, she gives you like this massive handshake, and I'm like, oh, okay, ease up. But she always says, tell me your story, don't leave anything out. And because, here's the thing, she suffered from acute myeloid leukemia, which the survival rate is very low, and she beat it. But what she learned while she had that cancer was that people they would say things to her like, how are you feeling? She's like, I feel like shit. This is not helpful. Like, ask me, like, what can I do to support you? What can I do to help you? And so we do the same thing with our stories. We tell all the good parts about our life, and we leave out the dirty little secrets. We leave out the fact that we were molested as a child, that we had a drinking problem as a young adult, that we had a mental health crisis where we were literally hiding in a bathroom and got lured out with a stake. A lot of people leave those things out. But I know there's people listening right now that are going, oh my God, me too. That's me too. And when there isn't a me too to see, you do feel like you're alone.
Right.
Oh. Well, do you have, like, we're going on longish time today, but I'm okay with that. Do you have to get anywhere?
No, I'm good.
Okay, I have to talk to you about two other things. Right. One of the things that Matt he's a habitual offender, harasses me about on social media is gross things, organ meat, hearts and livers and
lingua.
Okay. Yes, the tongue is the worst. I can see the freaking taste buds on that thing, man. Don't eat that. That's disgusting.
That part you peel off. So it's all about how you cook it.
God. Yeah, that's what they said about Brussels sprouts when I was little too, and those were terrible. I now love Brussels sprouts. But what is your freaking obsession with the organ meats? Tell the listeners.
Well, I'm all about. I'm obviously big in the health space, but organ meats are the most nutrient dense foods you can eat. So, if you want to get the most bang for your buck, you need to include organ meats in your diet. And it's really simple. You don't need to eat a lot of it. There's good ways to cook it. It's just like I always tell people, it's like chicken breast. Like, there's people that can absolutely destroy chicken breast, and it's like, oh, I don't want to eat chicken, but if you know how to cook it right, well, then it can taste amazing. Now, there are some organ meats I haven't quite figured out. Not all of them are delicious, but lingua, cow tongue, is probably one of the most delicious ones, but you have to know how to cook it. Because I do it in like either my Instant Pot or slow cooker. You peel off that outer membrane, and then you dice it up, and you blacken it and stuff, and just get it to where like it's nice and crisp, and it's like you wouldn't even know that it was a cow tongue at first. It's so good. That heart is a good one for beginners too. And it's just interesting how organ meats are also good for whatever that organ is. Heart's good for your heart. Eyes are good for your eyes. I haven't eaten eyes yet.
Oh, tell me you don't eat eyes. Oh.
I haven't had them, but I've heard brains are really good. I haven't had brains yet, though. But liver is one that's super cheap. It's super easy. And then I know I've sent you stuff with it. You can cook it to make it really good. What I usually do now, though, is just to get the nutrients. It's frozen. I cut it into little cubes. I take it like a pill, and yeah.
Matt once sent me a care package with this like little seasoning
The
packet called Pluck, right?
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, the whole time I was opening it and getting ready to sprinkle it on my eggs, I was like, pluck you, Matt Spaid, pluck you. But actually, it was pretty tasty. So
yeah, and they have some better ones now too. There's like a garlic one now. I don't remember, but yeah, I added that into my chili after you had said something about organ meats. So bone marrow is another really good one. But I highly recommend. There's what's her name? Ashley Van Houten. She's Muscle Maven on Instagram. She has a couple of good cookbooks. One of them's like strictly for organ meats. One is more, it's called carnivore-ish. So it's just like a higher protein one. So that's especially for like females. There's a lot of women that do not eat nearly enough protein because they feel like it'll make them bulky or overweight or something. And, couldn't be further from the truth. So I like what she has out there, but her cookbooks are really good. And that's where I really learned how to cook a lot of organ meats.
Well, I'm super good at making chicken, so I'm just going to stick to the chicken and just miss me with the organ meats. Yeah. Miss me with the organ meats.
Well, then just make sure you're eating the rainbow.
The rainbow. Yeah. Sometimes I have brown chicken. Sometimes I have white chicken. Okay. And as an obvious last topic, we need to talk about Martian.
Oh, yeah.
Tell the listeners about Martian.
Well, he was a rescue Doberman. He came from like a hoarder house. So he was like really nervous when we first got him. And he'd always try to run off. Like if the door opened up, he would be like, here's my chance, and blast off.
He gone.
But now he's figured out like, oh, these people love me and feed me and pet me. And he doesn't do that now. And he's super sweet dog. So great with Gabe and Zoe. He lets them just climb all over him, and he's just chill. But he's a Doberman mixed with, we want to say a hound. I think he's not. Our other Dobermans have been pure Dobermans. He's got a little something else in him, and he's also got a little bit of like a hip dysplasia thing or something. So he was just born with it. But it's just kind of funny when he runs or gets all excited. He looks like a seal or something hopping around. So the name Martian fit pretty well, but we actually picked that because of our last dog, Hillel, died. And I'm pretty sure we were friends whenever we had Hillel and he died. But yeah, he was named after the first guitarist for the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Hillel Slovak. And so Martian got the name because of the Chili Peppers song Death of a Martian, which is actually about, I think, Flea's dog. But yeah, so that's where the Martian thing, and then it worked out because he just kind of has those funky legs, and so Martian-y. But
and then also, you don't have Toothless anymore, right? You
no.
had Toothless the dragon.
Yeah, poor Toothless. That was more of a that was up to Lori's decision, anyways, to get him more, because I was like, I'm not gonna be able to do as much. I'll be working and stuff. And yeah, we got the bearded dragon because Gabe was obsessed with wanting one, but they're a lot more work than he thought they would have to be. And yeah, their shit is really disgusting. Like you'd think it'd just be some tiny little lizard droppings, but
yeah, lizard
turds. No, it is a giant mess. So you got to clean.
Ew.
A lot of times we'd be like, oh, it's been a nice chill day. And then you go inside and it's like, oh, Toothless decided to shit everywhere. And you can't just leave it because he'll get all in it, and then he'll get some sort of infection thing or something. So they're a lot of work. But yeah, so we had to make the decision to rehome him. But he went to a good home. Some friends of ours that actually own a farm, have all kinds of animals and stuff. And they got people on their property that help them out too with the animals and stuff. So I'm sure he's having a blast. Yeah, but it felt bad for Gabe, of course. He was pretty upset, but yeah. It was fun to have a bearded dragon. We had him a little leash for him and everything. They were cool, but then it was like we couldn't get him out that much because we were scared he'd like shit randomly, and yeah.
Yeah, that's gross. Yeah. Poor Toothless.
Yeah.
He's better off on the farm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this for me has been a terrific conversation. I think that it's going to really resonate. Wow, words are hard. Resonate with the listeners. How can someone get a hold of you if they wanted to reach out? Is social media the best way?
Yeah, that's probably the best way. Just the Spaid SC is my Instagram. I have an email, but it's probably confusing. So it's not that confusing, but yeah, Instagram's fine. Social media is easy. So.
Listen, I talk to Matt on Instagram, sometimes on the phone, but mostly on Instagram. So y'all can talk to him on Instagram too. I'll put
and I'm very
the address
there's
in the show notes.
People that send me there's actually a lot my nerve injury that happened. Forgot to kind of mention that, but there's a lot of people with that injury, and I've made a really good recovery. So a lot of people have been reaching out to me for that. So if there's anyone with a similar condition, I've been doing a lot to get better from it. So it's been a interesting experience. It's kind of like, I don't know, just another challenge to learn, but yeah, or conquer.
I also forgot Matt provides remote programming, and I've been bitching at him for like a year to charge more because it's ridiculously low. And so get on the ground floor on Matt's ridiculously low price programming before I finally convince him to raise the price to like a sustainable wage.
Yeah, I'm bad on that end of things. I've never been good on like the business end of stuff, which is an important side to things. But that's why I just do stuff out of my garage gym right now. Like I don't want to open up a gym because that's a whole other can of worms. But
yeah, don't do it.
I like just one-on-one stuff, and I don't do a lot of remote stuff now just because I like that in-person experience, and especially because a lot of times I'll write so let's say something as simple as a squat. Like, well, if I'm not able to watch how you squat, it's like I might need to change up your stance. I might be like, hey, instead of like doing this regular back squat, let's do a goblet squat, let's do a front squat, but I can't do that. And so I really prefer the in-person, but every now and then though I'll open it up and I do some. I had someone reach out to me and ask. That was someone I trained in Oklahoma. I wanted some Olympic lifting program, which I was like super excited about because I love Olympic weightlifting. It's just something that me and Lori are big fans of, and there's not a whole lot of people that do it in this area. So maybe we can get it to grow at some point, but yeah.
Spaid Strength and Conditioning Olympic lifting team. Drop the mic right there.
Well, I'm more strongman, but yeah. We can still drop the mic.
All right. Well, listeners, this has been a long one, but that's okay. If you stuck through to the end, thank you so much. Make sure to give us a review and a rating and all that good stuff. And AZ and Matt Spaid are most definitely